Dad, whatever happens now, I just want you to know your kid was one of them, Dad. One of the best of the best. Here's your look at the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse, Justice League The Snyder Cut, The Flash. Barry Allen is an excessively energetic student attending Central City College, where he studies criminal justice with the hope of one day freeing his incarcerated father. More than eager to team up with crime-fighting icon Batman, Barry's remarkably quick wit is surpassed only by his ability to move at hyper speed. Suppose before we focus on the fastest man alive, how about the first thing that we do, as we always do at the beginning of these reviews, is to figure out how tall is the figure. For that, to accomplish that, I'm going to bring in my trusty tape measure. And, admittingly, sometimes this tape measure does give a slightly off read. I don't know if it's just the weather conditions, a good gush of wind comes along and throws off the laser. I'm going to go ahead and go with that. It's not always close, but it's pretty close when it comes to measuring just how tall these figures stand. And it's, of course, what I like to use as my trusty tool to provide you guys with the necessary 411. Following up on that, we're going to go ahead and take the tape measure right at the very top of his head. I'm going to move it across because I don't want to clip his arm in the process of things. We're going to stop it right there. That seems like a good place. I'm going to stop it right there. And the Flash stands 8.2 inches in height. Right? Switching that over to centimeters, then you're looking at the figure standing 20.8, so it's a little over 20.5 centimeters tall. As some would say, it's not my first rodeo. It's not my first rodeo when it applies to the fact that we've looked at Justice League Snyder Cut figures from McFarlane Toys, having already looked at one. And at least it's one enough that I can do some size comparisons. We're going to move over Flash, the Scarlet Speedster, and we'll bring in Tactical Suit Batman with goggles. A nice looking figure, although I'm noticing some real looseness developing in the ankles. I'm hoping that it's not getting any looser. Batman does have a slightly heavier cape, so it's going to make him weeble and wobble a little bit more. But in the meantime, you can sort of see that they're going to be roughly around the same height to one another. If you count the points of Batman's cowl, then they're about the same height. If you don't count that, then Flash's head, his melon of a head, does seem a little bit bigger than Tactical Suit Batman that we've looked at before. To the figure's credit, unlike Tactical Suit Batman, Flash actually comes with a fair bit of accessories. Although, really, to be fair, it's one type of accessory times 4. In the meantime, though, we'll look at the trading card that comes included with him. Once again, though, we have an image of the Flash and not a picture of the figure. Thank you for doing this. I really do like that they use source material when it comes to the images on the fronts of the cards. I know this isn't going to impact everybody. It's not a deal breaker, and some people don't even care about the trading card. But I like to collect the trading cards, and I like to have source material provided on the front. Like, for example, when we looked at Batman, you can see that those are actual images of the actors from the movie and not pictures taken of the figures. Follow with this trend, McFarlane Toys team. Don't go with the idea of taking images of the figures. I don't personally like it. That's just my own personal opinion. Take that with a grain of salt. I like when they use source material instead. Anyways, on the back of the card, how much more time was he going to talk about that? No, I'm not talking any more about that. On the back of the card, though, you get your source material, pulling it from the fact it's Justice League, the Director's Cut, or the Snyder Cut from film 2021. Funny enough, I don't know why they call it the Director's Cut and fail to mention that Snyder's Cut. I don't know. Anyways, you've got the read-up down below. The very same read-up that we actually said at the beginning. I said, singular, said at the beginning of this review. So move that to the side. Of course, he does come with the same type of stand that came included with Batman. For those that doubt my saying of that, feast your eyes on the fact that there's two of the same stand. This is Flash's. This is Batman's. They are identical to one another. I did make the point mentioned in the Tactical Suit Batman, a little bit of dust or something on there. I did mention in the review of Tactical Suit Batman, it would have been a nice touch to see that the DC would have been omitted and instead put the Justice League logo, which isn't actually even on the cards either. But that JL logo would have been such a nice touch to include at the bottom of the display stand. Deal breaker? No. Just a suggestion. That's what it is. Just a suggestion. Put that to the side, and then, of course, we can look at the 1x4 accessories. They're basically all Speed Force parts. They're made of softer plastic, translucent and blue in coloring, And they vary slightly from one another. Some of them are a little bit longer than others, like this one right here. It's a little bit more curved as well. And there's this one. And there's this one. It's like a whole family, a Speed Force family. This is little Billy Speed Force on the end here. But they all basically work the exact same way. And there's no real instructions. Not this one is specifically printed with left arm. You won't see that on here. So you basically just use it for your own discretion. Just take the figure. You basically take these parts right here. And see how they're slightly softer plastic. You just fit them around his arms like that. Although I find I find properly, certain angles work a little bit better. Like this one here, as you can see, by the way it's sort of contoured to the one side, lends a little bit better to the idea of being displayed with his legs. And when I get it around his boot, you can sort of see what I'm talking about. See how this one kind of contours the thigh, just a little bit, the calf just a little bit more. And like I said, you can just, granted, this works so much better. He's not just going to stand there emitting speed force. That's ridiculous. So you may, of course, want to get him in a pose that's a little bit more fitting of the Flash. I'm just doing this for the time being. Somebody, I'm sure, could come up with a much more interesting running pose. But let's go with this for the time being, and then from there you can just attach the Speed Force parts, clip it around his arms. The one thing I did do at the beginning of this review, and might actually even just continue that trend, is leave a Speed Force piece off of this arm right here, because it's so close to his face. I feel like it competes with his face. So like if I put it right there, I don't know. Is it too close? Too close for comfort? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. We can go ahead and take the other parts, fit them just around. Again, no instructions. So if you want to say, well, that goes to this one, that goes to... No, there isn't. You're just saying stuff. You're just coming up with dribble. It's just dribble. We're going to attach that there. And again, you can just attach it onto the other leg. And you're basically just going to rinse and repeat. It does result in the figure looking a little bit more busy because you're adding all these extra pieces. It's not a fault. It's not a fault. It's just the fact that, yeah, I would probably only do some of it. It's a suggestion on my part to only say probably use only a couple of these. I may only put it on the one arm, one leg. I don't know. But at least the options are available. Okay, let's straighten out his arms and straighten out his legs. Make him look a little bit more prim and proper. We're going to start things off with looking at, of course, his face, which I think bears a good enough resemblance to the way Flash looks in the film, especially with this type of costume, which I have been very much on board the idea of hating this costume. But I will say, though, not only did I like the costume more in the Snyder Cut, but I actually liked Flash a lot more in the Snyder Cut than I did in the original release. It's not to say that I still have loved this costume. The costume does need change, and even with the standalone Flash movie that we are getting, it is going to be a different Flash costume. It's a little bit more closer to the comics. This clearly looks more like something that Barry has put together, makeshifted a cosplay suit that at least serves a practical purpose and helps reduce the amount of heat generated from the Speed Force. So I can get behind the idea, the crudely designed suit that he wears. And of course, it's not going to be the finalized suit that he's going to wear in the new Flash movie. Again, going back to his face, the only critique I could make, though, about the figure, and it may be an ongoing trend when I'm talking about these Justice League figures, is the lack of paint. There is paint, yes, on his arms. There is paint, yes, on his torso. And even like the emblem in the middle there that seems like it's sort of being squeezed by the sides of his pectoral muscles. But I find like the paint, maybe not so much on the face, but the rest of the costume really lacks. It needs an extra wash, or it needs something to make those features a little sharper. The little lines, for example, in the movie, I think were closer to being more of a silverish gold. They sort of just kept it to the same molding plastic as the red. They have, of course, to the credit, painted those areas that we've talked about already, like the belt, for example, the little side area on his forearm. But I feel like, again, like this figure sort of would have benefited so much more, especially when you're seeing like the back of his head sculpt, for example. Which I do like the accordion kind of snake coil to the back of his head. I really like the way that that was designed in the movie. But it feels like it's so unfinished because all of it is just that red plastic. If they had just taken what I would be holding in my hand right now, an imaginary brush, and brushing on, even just a black wash, I feel would have brought the details, especially to like the head area of the suit, would have made them stand out a lot better than what they are right now. What paint there is generally applied pretty good, like the little side fins on his face are in the gold. The emblem, despite looking so squished like this, at least it's painted pretty good. And like the belt area and the side area, and even like down to the feet as well. There isn't really any messy areas at all. If anything, again, it's just the fact that there's a lot of the red areas just left to the molding of the plastic. One thing we certainly will talk about when it comes to figures of posability, I guess we can talk a little bit about this right now, is this lower area here. Some would describe this as being an action figure diaper. Well, I feel it's one of the better examples of a figure diaper. It's a part to, of course, conceal the idea that you can see then the joint on the inside. If we move it out of the way, there's a big chasm gap between the top of his torso and the lower part of his legs. The part that they've put to conceal it is a softer plastic, but for little time that I've had it out of the packaging, I don't know if I've warped it. Even just moving the figure around, it seems very saggy and baggy. And in some cases, if you move the figure's torso too far to the side, you can pretty much, I don't know if you could fit spare change down there or something else. You could maybe carry his wallet around with him. It leaves such a big noticeable gap. And like I said, it's a very, very soft plastic. It really works against the figure by having such soft plastic like this, because it does resort in the figure having these lower kind of diapers. The back isn't so bad, but the gap that it leaves on the top, well, again, you'll see more of it when we talk about the figure's articulation. Speaking of the figure's articulation, for Flash's posability, his head rotates all the way around. You're only looking at a single ball joint working here. So, of course, this is all molded one piece. So there's not going to be a secondary ball joint at the base of his neck. And some nice detailing. This sort of looks like a thimble. I just noticed that right now. The head moves up and down. It rocks also back and forth. You can also rotate the head all the way around. I'm less bothered by the fact that there's a gap that's, you can see, like right at the top of the neck. Obviously, it has to be there, so it gives you more flexibility with what you can do with the head. It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers me down below here. The upper torso is on a ball joint. The lower torso, once again, is on a ball joint, but the more you rock it back and forth, the more gaps it leaves in this lower rubber piece on his torso. As for his arms hinge out both sides, and you can, of course, rotate the arms all the way around. I will say, at least to Flash, he's not as loose as Batman was. His elbows are nice and tight. Both the hinges that he does possess are nice and tight, unlike the tactical suit Batman that we looked at earlier. Hands rotate also all the way around. They can hinge back and forth. Yeah, he is going to have permanently posed running hands, or jazz hands if you want as well. He's good for miming Flash. Kind of wish he could have come with other hands as well, but I guess, to be fair, if you don't really have to consider them necessarily running hands, they're basically just relaxed hands. Relaxed hands, like that. Then the legs split out. You can split them out pretty far, a lot farther than what we could with Batman. They move forward, they move back, and maybe that is one of the reasons why this lower diaper has to be as big as it is. It's not so much to accommodate the lower torso, the abdomen area, this area right here, but it's more to accommodate the thickness of his thighs. Like, it fits pretty much in line with the tops of his thighs, and I guess as a sacrifice, it then has to leave a lot more gap along the top. They probably could have still tapered it off a little bit. I'm going to see if I can maybe heat this up a little bit and just sort of squish it together. I don't think it's probably going to fix it, because the moment I start moving the figure again for posability, it's probably going to make this nice and baggy again. The legs go forward. The legs go back. He does have a double hinge on the knee. No articulation for the lower leg. This is all molded to the bottom part of his leg area here below the knee. But he does have articulation on the ankles. Back and forth, rocking it back and forth this way. And Flash, the figure of Flash, does have a hinge on the front of his toes. Figure does also have pegs on the peg holes on the undersides of his feet. So, of course, you can make use of the display stand, which, of course, display stands in a case like Flash becomes ever handy, because, of course, you're probably not going to want to just display him standing like this. Flash is a figure, especially if you're going to be bringing in the Speed Force family, all four of them, or all, well, at least maybe one or two of all four of them. I don't know if I would be using all four of them, but if you definitely want to be displaying the figure in a running pose or something a little bit more interesting than the pose he's in right now, you may want to use the display stand, and thank goodness the figure comes included with one. While I do appreciate the fact that McFarlane Toys did include speed force effects, 4 of them actually, that you could attach to the figure's limbs, they're practical only if you have the figure in a running pose. If you're going to have him standing in a straight museum pose, or if you've got him in a pose like what I've got here on the rotisserie, then they're pretty much void, null and void, and I'm not going to use any one of them. I would have liked if they could have included more electricity, rubbery electricity that you could just sort of coil around the figure's arms and his legs. So of course, if you aren't going to have him in a running pose, you could use those instead. Thinking now, an idea has popped into my head that I think we did get ourselves blue, or at least yellow. Yellow is not really the color I would want to be going with, but we did get Speed Force like electricity that came packaged with the DC Multiverse Flash. I just end up doing that. I mean, I do like the fact that they included things like this, but when it's so specific to a certain type of way of displaying the figure, those Speed Force effects aren't going to be making an appearance, I think, on my display shelf. If you'd like to use them, by all means, all the power to you. But I'd rather just have electricity that could have wrapped around the figure's body instead. Just my own personal opinion. The figure is a nice looking figure if you like the design of this Flash suit, which I will say it's growing on me. I don't love it. But since watching the Snyder Cut, my appreciation for the Flash is a lot greater than it was when we first saw the theatrical release, which I don't know if many people will be going back to watching the theatrical release of Justice League, having now seen what the Snyder Cut ended up being. And of course, when it comes to the Flash, his costume is going to change with the standalone Flash, which based on sort of what we've seen so far, is going to be more of a comic-rooted costume. It's going to have less panels, and it's going to look more like one solid costume. And I like that. I'm glad to see that this is sort of just a prototype suit. The coloring of the figure is really good. I mean, what little coloring there is. Admittingly, the red and all these figures, really, not just the Flash, but really consistently, one thing to take away from the DC Multiverse figures is that a lot of times they are lacking paint. The red is good on the Flash, but it really needs a little contrast. It needs something darker applied there so that those molded details stand out. Flash has coloring in other places, but anything that's really red is very barren and vacant of color, other than just, again, the molding of the plastic. And then again, speaking of the molding of the plastic, we cannot overlook the lower diaper that the figure does have. Why it had to be that soft of a plastic, I guess it's so that it didn't limit the figure's articulation in his leg, but it sort of results in sort of a saggy lower torso, which I'm sure Flash really doesn't really want to have. Other than that, though, I like the look of the figure of the Flash, and he's still not my least favorite of this wave. Believe you me, we're going to be talking a little more about Aquaman in the upcoming review. I know this is the second time we've talked about Aquaman. Stay with it. Stay with it. When we have a look at Aquaman, you'll see what I mean. Have you picked up the Flash for yourself? If you have, let me know down below in the comment section what you guys think of the figure, or if you've successfully picked up any of these Snyder Cut Justice League figures, which few and far between. I've seen some people very successful at getting the entire wave, and other people like myself have had to pre-order these and just wait till finally the online sites decided to ship them, or I guess when they eventually got the stock in. Needless to say, we have finished looking at the tactical suit Batman. We have finished looking at the fastest man alive Flash. We are still going to be looking at the rest of the figure assortment that makes up the Snyder Cut Justice League movie. If you guys are new to this channel, enjoying all the content you're seeing, you can do one thing to benefit your cause. Make sure you click not only the bell notification, but make sure you're also subscribing to this channel. You'll get those friendly reminders of when new videos will be popping up. And of course, occasionally I can also whisper in your ear, there's more videos coming up. So definitely we're going to be looking at the rest of the Justice League Snyder Cut reviews of DC Multiverse Snyder Cut figures. And of course, we're also going to be looking at other things as well. So there's always lots of stuff coming your way to this channel. So making sure you're keeping your peepers peeled at all times. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.